and welcome to this incredibly special exclusive edition of Truth or Politics. Before we get started, I want to say thank you to MBR TV and Steve Hall, who's one of our heroes. He is, even though he's been threatened and everything else, he stands up against government corruption and airs our shows. We want to thank him. We want to thank people behind the scenes with Truth or Politics up in Pulaski County and also in Louisville. We want to thank Michael Mann, our technical genius, who made this possible today, because when it comes to technology, everyone that knows me knows that I am like technologically challenged, to say the least. My 8-year-old grandson has to tell me how to use my Android phone. Okay, what we are here today for is what I consider one of the worst cases I've ever dealt with. Unequal justice by any measure. This case is the worst I've ever seen. It involves selective prosecution and persecution over 20 years of a whistleblower and my true friend, Jim Fowler. And I've been proud and honored to battle with him for 20 years, myself and others. And he's got to be the bravest man on earth. We should be playing that song, I Won't Back Down, because when you hear this story, folks, of what this young man, or used to be young man,
I'm a lot older than you.
I don't know about that. What he has gone through, what his family have gone through, because he dared to speak truth to power, because he dared to be a whistleblower, it is nothing short of, appalling. For those, we have a lot of new people that are going to be watching this, because this is going to go multi-state and hopefully national. My background, just real quick, so you understand why I have the credibility to say that. I have over 35 years as a criminal investigator, first as a special agent in the military, and also with the federal government. And after that, I became a defense investigator for several attorneys, working on felony cases. So I have 35 years as an investigator, and all my years as an investigator dealing in federal courts, state courts, I've never seen anything like this. And what happened this week was nothing short of amazing. It never happens. I'm here to tell you, anybody's got lawyer friends out there, ask them, have you ever heard of this? What happened was, after years and years of battles and persecutions, and I think 7 wrongful indictments, this poor man finally battled, and there's a group of us that stood up for him, and he stood up for himself. We convinced a federal judge and a federal prosecutor that we were identifying corruption. They believed us, and for the first time I've ever seen in my life, a prosecutor, federal prosecutor, and a federal judge sign an order against prejudice. I don't know if you probably can't see this. I'm going to post this on our Facebook page, but I'm going to hope so you guys see that I'm not making this up. Okay, wait. I don't know technology. Here it is. Order. And I'm going to read this. The matter before the court on United States motion to dismiss indictment, having reviewed the motion and the court being otherwise sufficiently advised, is dismissed indictment grant. Counts 1 and 2 and 3 indictment are dismissed with prejudice against the government. This was an FBI generated case. It was a task force generated case, and it was dismissed with prejudice. What that means is they can't go after him again. They're done. We finally, and mostly Jim, you get most of the credit, what you went through. What this also shows, folks, is this. For anybody that thinks you can't beat City Hall, for anybody that thinks that there's no more honest cops, no more honest prosecutors, and no more honest judges, they may be rare, but this proves otherwise, okay? Because let me tell you, there's a whole lot of people and lawyers, a judge, cops, who witnessed what Jim Fowler is going to tell you, and I'm one of them, and came to the defense of Jim Fowler, and this was the result. And it's 20 plus years in the making. And so at this point, I am very proud to introduce my friend, Jim Fowler. And there, you should see him on the screen there with me. Welcome, Jim Fowler, whistleblower extraordinaire.
Thank you, Darlene, very much.
Tell us.
Go ahead.
Oh, I think first. Tell us from the beginning, though. I really want you to start from the beginning, how you became initially a whistleblower in Florida, because, folks, he's not just any kind of whistleblower. He is, in my mind, and I think GAP has labeled him, Government Accountability Project and POGO have labeled him a national security whistleblower, because what he was whistleblowing on in Florida is of national security. It's about a terrorist organization. So take it away, Jim. Tell us about this.
All right. As you know, Darlene, and I have to, before I do that, I wouldn't be fair if I didn't tell everybody here, yeah, I battle in court pretty well, but you can't do this stuff on your own. Darlene has been threatened. She's been pursued by people that wanted to hurt us. Austin, who is a prosecutor and one heck of a good lawyer, and they're just incredible people. They're devoted to a cause, which is the truth and justice. And I wouldn't have made it without them. There's some others that I won't name. Darlene and I talked about this. There's a lot about to happen with what the fallout is. And I've got other things going on in court right now to clear the rest of my name. And so we're not going to name names, but we'll tell you activities and positions and who, basically what the people have said. The case, the last case.
Let me interject something real quick, Jim, because I don't want to forget it. Also, what this court system did, and this is one reason we have to be very careful not to name names of witnesses who came forward for Jim Fowler because they were in danger. I have never seen in all my years in dealing with courts, any court, especially federal court, a prosecutor and a judge agree to seal affidavits from witnesses to protect them. That's how dangerous this was.
Well, tell them who it was to protect them from, Darlene.
To protect them from federal agents and other bad cops. And let me just preface this too, because I don't want to sound like one of these people, and Jim is not too. I know Jim. We're not one of these people that think all law enforcement is bad and everything else. My husband's a prosecutor. I support law enforcement. I fully believe most law enforcement officers have a doggone dangerous job they do every day. They're honest. Unfortunately, there are those out there that are absolute corrupt and bad. They lie in affidavits, they do things. And when you blow the whistle on them, especially at the level that Jim did against the FBI and against a prosecutor, a corrupt prosecutor in Florida, the result is this. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's one other thing too that was significant about this is this judge and this prosecutor in Jim's federal case sealed the affidavits because they believed that these witnesses were so important and they were threatened and they were in danger. So go ahead, Jim.
All right. Basically, this whole thing started, I think, Darlene, you're aware I was an engineer. And because of where I lived, things were dying in the economy up in Ohio. And I moved to Florida and became a securities dealer. And my boss, after working for him a while, I realized he was running a scam. I hired a detective and a lawyer, found out the guy was a crook, and I went to the authorities. What I didn't know was I exposed the fact that our government, or certain elements of our government, were actually funding a terrorist organization called the PKK. It's the Turkish Kurdistan Workers' Party over in the Middle East. At the same time, the money that was stolen or scammed or whatever, the government put that on myself and several other people. But recently it's come out that the money was actually stolen by the prosecutor himself. The courts got involved in that. They threw out the restitution I was hit with, froze it, and then left the conviction in place. That's being dealt with now.
And how many years ago was this? So people understand.
My conviction was in 2000, but I need to back up a minute. In 97, this all started in 93. In 97, they indicted myself and several other people. And I had no culpability, and they held me almost a year without a bond, without a trial, without a hearing. And as fantastic as this is going to sound, I was held in the Palm Beach County Jail, and I wrote a letter to the court, and I said, my lawyers had gone all the way to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. couldn't get any relief. And up until this point, there had been several efforts to kill me. I had moved to Europe and a lot of other things. And there was a guy working for the government, and we found out for sure later that he was working for the government. And they were trying to kill me. And a lot of things, I had to have security for my family and everything else. So I wrote a letter to the judge, and I told her, I said, this agent is a calculated, conscious liar, broke in my home, stole my car, caused my daughter to be sexually assaulted. She was 4 years old. I know that sounds fantastic, but it happened and we proved it. And the amazing part is when you prove it, they have what they call immunity. And that's part of what's going on in Congress right now. There's a discussion, a fight over qualified immunity. Well,
Explain a little bit about qualified immunity that prosecutors, especially federal and federal agents, have.
Government officials have qualified immunity. The government has sovereign immunity. The only way you can sue the government is if they agree to be sued. Suing a federal agent, they have to do something outside their ordinary course of duties to be able to reach them on something called a Bivens action. It's also known as a 1983 action. The problem is these judges whitewash everything. They don't care, and I'm going to get into some of the things they did to me. And if you're not astounded, you're dead or asleep, one or the other. The judge, based on my letter, called me into court. I was held to jail. The U.S. Marshals thought I was crazy to write something like that. This judge was the head, her husband was the head of the FBI in the Southern District of Florida. They held 6 days of detention hearings. Detention hearings only last 20 minutes. Mine lasted 6 days. It got so vile that the deputy sheriffs that were hauling me back and forth from the jail to the courtroom, they were going to beat up the agent because it came out and I proved that this agent effectively caused my daughter at 4 years old to be put in the hands of a pedophile by interfering with my custody hearings. This is the kind of stunts they pull. They'll get involved in any aspect of your life. So I went to trial and I lost. The judge didn't believe I was guilty. By this time, I lived in Kentucky. So the prosecutor from the Southern District of Florida started contacting the authorities in Kentucky and asking them to indict me at all costs. They indicted me.
Can I jump in here?
Sure, show.
I was a witness to this when I first met Jim Fowler. Most of you know I'm a whistleblower too, and I was on TV and radio, and Jim got a hold of me and said, hey, I want to meet with you. Well, we became friends. I believed him. I researched this case. Not only that, the Commonwealth attorney at the time here in Kentucky told me that this AUSA, Assistant United States Attorney, this McAdams, that's how I pronounce his name, right? McAdams. He actually called up there and demanded that the Commonwealth attorney at that time, his name was Bob Bertram, God rest his soul, go after Jim Fowler. And he used words like, this guy's a bully. I looked into Jim's case and there's nothing there and I'm not going after him. And when the Commonwealth attorney of Kentucky refused to go after Jim Fowler, the AUSA down there calling up here threatened that Commonwealth attorney.
Well, he went in and Bertram actually testified under oath in court on my behalf that this was going on. Now, the first time they indicted me, and I'm not making this up, it sounds ridiculous. When they indicted me in Kentucky, they indicted me for cutting trees that didn't exist. And then we got that thrown out, and within a few days of that, they indicted my wife and I. My wife's passed from all of this. And she had cancer and committed suicide by cancer. She couldn't take anymore. But what they did is they indicted us, claiming that we owed employees money. They had put one woman on the stand who claimed she was owed $30,000 for 2 weeks' pay. Later on, I was able to get the files, and it showed that she was actually in a mental institution in Oklahoma when she claimed she worked for us. She never did work for us. Then when that fell apart, they used that indictment to rearrest me in the Florida case because by that indictment, it violated my bond. I was out on bond. So when they got down there, they locked me in the hole. It's known as the SHU in the federal government. It's called the Special Housing Unit, but it's basically the hole. They held me there. We lost the appeal because I had new lawyers and I couldn't help them. And then the judge refused to sentence me. He said he never believed I was guilty. By that time,
wait. I want you to repeat that because that's important. The judge refused.
There's a stronger statement from him. He kept refusing to sentence me. We went into sentencing, and the judge slammed a stack of papers down, and he said, "This isn't like this is going on in some vacuum out here. I've got papers and affidavits all over my desk." So the judge refused to sentence me. A guy named Bill Mushi, who was a major league reporter, I believe he got a Pulitzer Prize. He was the reporter at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. 6 weeks after that hearing where he refused to sentence me, Mr. Mushi called the court's chambers asking for the transcript, and they found out the media was on it, so the judge ordered me released immediately. I went back to Georgia and then on to Kentucky. But what happened was, the long and the short of it was, the judge ultimately refused me or sentenced me to time served, left the conviction in place. And then there was another sentencing that happened for the main guy that I had turned in. And I haven't given you the kicker yet that applies to today. As we sit here right now, this applies to today from that case. The judge said on the record, he said, "I never believed Fowler was guilty. Now I believe he was a victim." And he said, "There's been a lot of collateral damage in this case. The collateral damage was the rape of my 4-year-old. I had a 21-year-old daughter die, and I had an unborn child die because the agent in the case was doing things like calling my wife when she was pregnant, and they were holding me in prison or jail. They were the agent and that terrorist over in Europe that was trying to kill me. The terrorist would call my wife and say that they were going to rape and murder and cut the baby out of her stomach if she didn't tell them where the money was. Then the agent
and this was a terrorist. This was actually the terrorist that you were whistleblowing about.
One of them, yes, one of them. And then right behind that, the agent would say, if you just tell us where the money is, I can make this stop. Now, after that, when we moved to Kentucky, by this time I started being coached heavily by a lawyer I'm not going to name. He's a Louisville lawyer. He's one of the most accomplished attorneys in the country. And he turned me into not only a lawyer, but a very good one. I've worked for federal justices. I spent time with Justice Scalia. I've worked with judges. I'm brought into cases where there's vast corruption because my experience from this taught me things that they can't learn in law school. I had met Darlene because she wrote a book called Bordergate, and the government doesn't want you to know about it. And she was a law enforcement in the military, and then she was a federal agent. She didn't really tell you how much of a federal agent she was. She made one of the largest drug busts in U.S. history. The woman you see sitting there is a heavyweight, skinny little girl, but she's a heavyweight. And she really, when I called her and told her about my case, she thought at first, well, I'll listen. And then she said, wait a minute, this is too familiar to me. And so that's how we started working together. So the Kentucky indictments got even worse. You have a wonderful judge in Kentucky who used to be the president of the Senate named David Williams. David Williams had to leave the Senate. As he told me himself, it was time to leave. Well, he got assigned to me as a special judge after Cletus Miracle got assigned to me. So I was forcing things like special grand juries and that. And the Kentucky Supreme Court ordered that any and all cases with Fowler as witness, lawyer, or party in any way, shape, or form are assigned to Judge Cletus Miracle. Long story short, I had discovered that they were using cell phones to eavesdrop on the grand jury who was investigating the police in Russell County. And so the judge found out about it, and he was going to hold me in contempt. We had a hearing. The contempt was, he couldn't do it. A couple of weeks later, he decided to change his mind, had me locked up. Here's the incredible part about this. The FBI called me on a Wednesday before I was supposed to be locked up. This is Kentucky FBI. And told me that I don't have a hearing on Saturday because they had arrested the judge the night before, and he was involved in racketeering.
Wait. They arrested Judge Miracle the night before. Okay, go
Right.
ahead, because I want people to
Yeah,
understand.
you're right, darling. They arrested Judge Miracle for racketeering, witness tampering, jury tampering, and oh, by the way, he murdered somebody, shot him in the head in a voting booth in 1978 and got away with it. And I asked them, I said, this is a state proceeding. Why are you calling me? And the guy said, well, you know how this goes. He said, if we find out that you're in danger, we have to tell you. And we found a hit list in his house and you're on it. This judge was going to have him killed. So the beat goes on. The local police were so corrupt. I was with another lawyer. I was representing a pharmacy chain in Russell County. And we were certain that the police were doing the robberies and burglaries of these drugstores. So we couldn't get any help from any law enforcement or anything else. And I mailed a mailer out to the entire community. It cost $10,000 to do it. Cost my client that. So eventually they sued us, which is what we wanted, because we couldn't, every time we sued them, the courts would throw it out. So lo and behold, it gets assigned to Judge Miracle before the arrest. Miracle gets arrested, and now it gets assigned to Judge David Williams. That case is now under review by a lot of authorities that are way, way up there, because David was under investigation, or probably still is, by the Southern District of New York, and Darlene and I were witnesses against him. And we were interviewed by the U.S. Attorney's Office, and because I'm also a pilot, I had flight records that showed where he was going. And so David basically gave me what you could best describe as a kangaroo trial. You've never seen anything like this. I had witnesses on the stand admitting to tampering with the grand jury. David would stop the testimony and keep the jury from using it for anything. And they got a judgment against me, these two officers, and actually there was more than two officers. Well, when that didn't work too well, Darlene and I got recruited to get involved in a nationally famous case where Rick Pitino in Louisville, Kentucky, had raped Karen Cipher. Now everybody thought, oh, geez, he's a great guy. Well, that's kind of since proven itself to be not true. We held a national press conference, and you can see that press conference on my website. It's still there. And can I say that, Darlene, the website?
Yeah. Can I interject something?
Sure.
Karen had been convicted, and what we found out after we got involved after her conviction.
Yes.
And we got a lawyer out of Washington, D.C. that risked his neck, and who, by the way, was severely retaliated against too after this happened. Okay. We proved up a mountain of evidence that Karen Cipher was set up by her own attorney, that he threw her under the bus for his good old boys, which she worked with as a prosecutor first, right there in Louisville. And we had all this evidence, and it is required when you come up with evidence like this. The judge was required to have a hearing, and he repeatedly refused to have a hearing. And that's one of the reasons we held this press conference.
Okay, so Darlene, we did this press conference, and I guess I'm the big mouth of the group. I did most of the speaking. And 3 days after the press conference, and my law office was behind my house. I live in a rural area, did. 3 days after the press conference, I was sick in bed, and we had this pounding at the front door. My little girl opened the door, and all you heard was people yelling, "Warrant, warrant." I had 20 heavily armed IRS agents in the home and office with search warrants. Two of the people that came with them were the two officers that I'd been trying to put in prison for the burglaries of these drugstores. So
and among other things, to include trying to intimidate me.
Yeah, well, that was another story that goes behind this a little bit. But when the raid was over, I had called Darlene, and she headed to Russell County, which is a couple hours. And the first thing, she's an experienced federal agent, and she started looking at it from their perspective, not mine. I'm a defense expert. She's a prosecution expert. She said, "Jim, look at what they took." She said, "The only thing they took here was Cipher's files and a few of the files on the two crooked cops." Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have to back up and tell you that up until this point, I'd had several break-ins, middle of the night home invasions, if you will, into my office where my files were taken. And the only thing they could get was my financial files, tax records, things like that. So for several years, we had been arguing with the IRS. We couldn't get our tax returns filed. Finally got them filed, but they played another trick with it. Darlene said, you know, the only thing they took was this material, and we realized it was right. Next thing you know, we realized my computer was missing, and it had all the recordings in it of all the interviews and all the other evidence. Somewhere in all of this, I think it was a couple years before that, 2 witnesses came forward and said that the 2 officers that Darlene and I were working with, or working against to try to get them indicted, were going to kill them. They gave sworn testimony that they were going to murder them. So the cops found out I did that, and they ran in, and that was the fourth and fifth indictments. I'm sorry, there's so many, it's hard to keep track. So they indicted me for tampering with a witness and didn't know that I recorded the witness statements. So that indictment was in 2006. As I sit here today in 2001, that indictment is still sitting there.
2021.
Yes, 2021, I'm sorry. And the judge, the special judge assigned to it is David Williams. Now that's about to be changed by some things that are going on based on this latest dismissal. But as the beat goes on, Darlene started getting followed and harassed, threatened, an abundance of things. And she's got training and weapons and all that, and still you worry that somebody might try to kill her. So about this time, the mayor in Russell County comes to me and tells me that the chief of police is going to assassinate him. So I filed a motion in federal court, and we even played the recording of the mayor talking to the police commissioner there. Nothing was done about it. And the beat went on, and I started discovering sex trafficking and everything else. That's when we took the Karen Cipher case. And right after that raid, things got really weird. Evidence started disappearing. My computer was gone. We couldn't get anywhere with anything. All the lawyers that were involved, they were trying to defend the client I was defending. And then the lawsuit they brought against my client, they used that to depose him. And if you're ever under indictment and they want to depose you, don't let them, because all it is an entrapment. The lawyers that allowed the entrapment were the same lawyers that were the original lawyers that defended Karen Cipher, and they were in on it. So my client got convicted over it. Fast forward to the IRS matter, I had a trial. It was a 2-week trial. I represented myself. I did a really good job. I started tearing everything apart, witnesses falling apart and everything else. I had one key witness. I can't tell you who that is or give you too many specifics, but I can tell you this. As Darlene signed an affidavit to, and so did a law enforcement officer, as well as an official, I had one witness that I was holding in the wings who was going to testify that that person was present when the federal government from Florida, the prosecutor from Florida, the 2 cops up in Russell County, and others were having regular meetings to figure out how to frame me. And they did it through this IRS thing. Well, you'd think that the minute I called her to testify and a jury heard this, it would be over with. They kidnapped her during the trial. They went to her with a subpoena, a state subpoena, told her that they had to keep her in some location. We couldn't find her. During my trial, Darlene was my investigator, couldn't find this witness. She finds everybody. Couldn't find her. After the trial, a law enforcement officer contacted me and said, I found her. I said, is she dead? And he said, no. And Darlene immediately came to Russell County. We took a videotaped interview of her, and she told us the whole story. You would think that when on an appeal, that would be enough.
Can I interrupt? Because it's important to tell what that story is, okay? This individual had the means to know, and she resigned from her job because she was honest and she was going to testify for Jim. Okay. When they showed up with this subpoena, they showed up under the guise of, yeah, we're taking you to court to testify for Jim Fowler. She thought she was going to testify for Jim Fowler. They took her to a room in Jamestown court, put her in a witness room and said, now we'll call you. Jim Fowler will call you if he needs you. Okay. And so she sat there. And, and then afterwards, they came back and said, well, like 2 days they did this to her. And they said, well, everything's good. Jim Fowler didn't need you. Okay. So
Darlene,
Jim
you might
Fowler's
want to
trial.
interject. You might want to interject that she was so adamant about testifying. I had a court reporter come to my office and she gave a sworn statement to a court reporter about the events that happened. And so I went to the court about all that. The court refused to hear it. That's the bottom line. Here, a witness is kidnapped that's got material testimony. We later found out that the judge in the case, that the state authorities had his son under indictment for some.
That's real important. This is the judge in your federal arrest case, sat on the bench, okay, and did not disclose, which he is required not only to disclose this, that his son's under indictment, that's the boot on his neck while he's sitting on your case. Not only did he not disclose it, he was required to recuse himself and step down.
So, okay, all this goes down, and I'm going to fast forward, Darlene, a little bit here. They send me out to West Virginia to a camp, and they assign me to maintenance there. And they decide, and I was attacking my case from prison. The appellate lawyer they gave me would not do his job. They forced me to take him. They wouldn't let me represent myself. Although I've practiced all the way to the Supreme Court many times. I've practiced at The Hague in the Netherlands. I practiced at courts in other countries. They wouldn't let me represent myself on appeal. So the Court of Appeals allowed this clown to represent me. He wouldn't bring up the issues. So at the prison, they had me run over with a tractor. And there's a lot of details I want to hold there just because there's about to be some other investigations on that. But so my guts were essentially hanging out. They made me wait 8 months to get a surgery. They gave me a half-ass surgery, ridiculous surgery. The injury resurfaced immediately, and then they locked me in the hole. Would not give me even an aspirin, and my guts were hanging out. They held me there 71 days and transferred me to Arkansas, to a real prison. That was a camp. Now I'm in a real prison. Luckily, as the good Lord does, there was a counselor there that the minute I walked through the door, he said, man, you're an innocent guy. Why are you here? That place in Arkansas is 65% sex offenders. He said they send people here to really get even with them. And what it was is I was proceeding in my appellate work and starting to pound pretty hard on the government. So this whole thing was an effort to shut me up, as the whole thing has been. So I get released after all the time, doing the time, as you call it, it was 28 months, at a 36-month sentence. I went to a halfway house in Louisville. Those people there could not have been better. They got me surgery, corrected surgery. I was finally okay. I almost died. The doctor
Can I interject something?
Absolutely.
While this is going on, because it's real important to splice this in here. While this is going on, a whole team of people, lawyers and a judge, are trying their hardest to get Jim out and help his wife and kids, okay? And to include a state representative, okay? Because all of us know the truth. We know what the evidence shows, that Jim was innocent and he's being targeted. He's being persecuted by the government. So, I would get phone calls from his wife. It was the most pitiful thing ever. And, she had been a cancer survivor, okay? And I would go and visit Jim, and Jim just looked like hell. Sorry, but there's another word. I mean, I was afraid he was going to die in prison, and my husband did too. And his poor wife, just was going through hell. And I'm sorry, that's what it was. His kids were going through hell. And, at some point her cancer came back and she just refused treatment. And I took a phone call one night, this is this was after the IRS thing happened. I took a call from her one night, and it was the most jaw-dropping call I've ever had. My husband witnessed the call, and she was sobbing. And what she was basically telling me, and also there was other witnesses to this who wrote affidavits, okay, is that while he's at the halfway house, the FBI is trying to, again, build another case on him, So they're showing up at her house and they're threatening her. You better roll on him, or your husband's never coming home. You better roll on him, or we'll put you in a cell right next to him. Things like that, threatening her and the kids. And at some point, she called and said her cancer came back, and she said, "I wish the cancer had taken me the first time, and I'm not taking treatment this time. I can't stand this anymore." And when he says his wife died by suicide by cancer, that's an honest statement. That's an honest statement. And we had to watch this. People surrounding Jim watch this happen to one of the nicest, sweetest, honest women you would ever meet, and good mother. This is what happened. The harassment and the persecution was so bad. She, on the phone call with me, I just wish the cancer would take me. And I'm sorry, Jim, but I had to interject that.
That's fine, because I need to back up a little bit. 2 days before I was supposed to go to Virginia, West Virginia, to the prison, to the camp, my wife had a very successful medical practice in Louisville. It was on the verge of literally exploding into major league success. We had worked on this for a few years, sold everything we had to pay to get it started. And I mean, literally scrounged. So she had investors and everybody was happy, and things started getting kind of weird there a few weeks before there. The two people that were working for me in my trial turns out to be CIs for the government. So they had a spy, 2 spies working for me, and that's all being dealt with now by upper authorities. Even there are a lot of honest people in the government. There's a lot. I just happen to be the one that blew the whistle, and I'm saving the Pelosi issue for you last, Darlene, and you know about it. So, and don't let me forget. I'll make a note. But anyway, I had my law office in the back of her practice, and I was defending my IRS case. It was after the conviction and everything. We had, not this time 20, it was 40. We had 40 heavily armed federal agents. They were from every jurisdiction you can think of. They were CIA, there was FBI, there was FDA. They were all there. They raided the office. We had a practice with 7,000 patients. This was a successful practice. So I left 2 days later to go to prison. The practice was destroyed. The business was destroyed. And this agent started showing up. My wife had to move to an apartment. And Darlene, I hope this is okay to tell, because I'm going to tell it. She went a couple weeks without electricity. She went without food. Darlene's husband paid her bills a couple times. My kids stepped in and paid the bills. And there was a really nice lady in Louisville who certainly has a tremendously wrong idea at this point, but anyway, who was helping. Like Darlene said, there was a judge, lawyers, prosecutors, representatives, somebody from the governor's office. The kicker to this is I was asked to head up a task force to investigate and prosecute corruption in the state of Kentucky by the governor's office. Just before
that is correct. That is absolutely correct. In fact, you and I and several others were going to be on this task force because we proved up about the corruption.
And so the bottom line was they were harassing her, and she still had I've got a lot of children. I had 8, 2 died from all this nonsense. There were still 2 at home, or 3 at home, I'm sorry. The one was over 18, he left. He didn't want to deal with the government coming and harassing at the door and all that. And this agent kept coming, and then the agent started going to the landlord saying, how are they paying the rent? How are they paying the rent? Of course, the landlord wants her out. Then she would go apply for a job. She'd leave the job application. The agent would show up at the job, say, I'm from the FBI, let me see her application. She couldn't get a job. This is a sick kind of crap. Well, so going forward, like I said, there are honest prosecutors. Thank the good Lord in heaven. I got one in this case. So I get released. I've moved back to Georgia, and I'm doing what I'm doing. And I'm on probation for 3 years. It ends this month. And my supervised release of the probation officer has been textbook perfect and honest. And she called me and she said, Jim, I don't know how to tell you this, but you've been indicted in Kentucky. I said, what? She said, you've been indicted by the federal government in Louisville and Kentucky. You got to call this agent. She said, no, I'm going to tell you. They wanted to come guns a-blazing and raid you and have you drug off and all like they have in the past. She stopped it. She stopped it cold. And the two case agents that I met out at they had the initial appearance at a jail. I just had to appear there and then go home. They said, we're not trying to detain you. They said, the female agent looked at me. She said, Mr. Fowler, I'm going to tell you, I checked you out. She said, I really checked you out. She said, you're a really good person and you don't deserve any of this. Both agents at the same time said, this is a terrible injustice. And then the guy agent said, Mr. Fowler, I'm going to tell you, the people that were doing this to you are gone and nobody's going to do it to you anymore. So I did the appearances. I had to sit the day at the jail waiting for the judge and all. I got released immediately. I went to Kentucky and then it started. The prosecutor, I represented myself, case is over. The prosecutor, immediately I said, look, I would like to have an open dialogue. And I love this part, against the chronic complaining of Darlene, telling me, quit telling her anything. I kept saying, Darlene, I think this lady's honest. I want to give her some stuff. And I did. And finally,
I worried because we had dealt with so many dishonest federal prosecutors.
Amen.
That it scared me that he was giving up too much of the case up front. And that's what I cautioned him, not just me, other people cautioned him about that too. But turns out, thank God, he was right and we were wrong. And I'm so happy.
That was on the news, ladies and gentlemen. I was right, you were wrong. So I got to back up a minute. A few months before this, I had two congressmen ask me to do some things and they would help me. Now, keep in mind, the IRS had indicted me and convicted me of not filing my tax returns for 2006, 7, and 8 and not paying any taxes. Well, the one congressman is stellar. His name is Jody Heiss. He had taken on the IRS before and beat them. And this guy is phenomenal. And he promised me, he said, you come out of retirement and I'll help you get those tax returns. Because I knew we'd filed them. IRS was hiding them, and they had stolen.
Well, yeah. Well, you got to jump back. The reason you couldn't find them is people broke into your house and took them, and when they did cough up some stuff, when they did the raid, the IRS raid in Russell Springs, a lot of the stuff they took had nothing to do with an IRS case. It was about Karen Cipher and that drug case, and they actually left checkbooks and everything else sitting there. No IRS agent with half a brain would leave that kind of stuff. But
anyway,
have your case done. Go ahead.
As things progressed, I was starting to appear at different political gatherings. I was asked and welcomed and all. One of the congressmen pointed me out and he said, I'd like you to tell the crowd here what you've been through and the kind of federal the kind of things in dealing with a federal prosecutor. And I did. I told them in a lot shorter sense. I told them everything that had happened to me. And so I fast forward, I've now been indicted in Kentucky on this tax thing, or on the fraud thing, because what they indicted me for was not telling, now Darlene, please don't laugh yet, okay? You're gonna laugh in a minute, I know.
I know it's laughable. It is.
Yeah,
Okay.
they indicted me for not telling people about my quote unquote criminal history, or I had a bankruptcy to try to save our house when they stole that. And when Darlene heard this, she started laughing. She said, "We can't get you to shut up." I've never met anybody I didn't tell them what the government's done to me, because I think it's important everybody realizes how dangerous our government is.
And he's even appeared, folks, at Washington press conferences with GAP and POGA, Government Accountability Project and POGA, with other whistleblowers, and told his whole story. He's been on radio shows. He's been on my show. He has not shut up
I've
about
been on,
this.
how many times on television? A couple hundred? I don't know.
Yeah.
You know,
But yet they were going to indict him. And part of the indictment was, or the biggest part of the indictment was, he concealed that from his partners, which I was present when he would never shut up about it. And neither was his wife. And I don't blame them. They were angry. You know, they were just persecuted. Everybody knew about Jim Fowler's story. Every partner, everybody knew it. And that was the biggest lie on an affidavit for a search warrant and a filing in court I've ever seen in my life.
Well, the national press conference I did in Karen's case, I started it out by telling them everything I'd been through. And that's,
Right.
Again, that's on the website. Is it okay to give the address?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
It's jsfii.com. JS as in Sam, F as in Frank, II.com. So anyway, the charges in Kentucky, when I looked at them, I honestly had to laugh because they were ridiculous. One of the main investors, they had claimed we had taken from all of them. They claimed my wife and I had taken $700,000 or about that from these investors and used it for personal use. But when you started looking through everything, you realized we didn't take anything. And I kept working on the prosecutor to give her information, see how she'd react. Because at one time I offered to meet with her, but she wouldn't give me the assurances I needed to say, look, I'll sit down, I'd bring Darlene and some of the other witnesses, and she could get a sense. Well, she did her own spreadsheets and found out that the IRS or the FBI lied in their spreadsheets. And a week ago, Tuesday, sent me an email with the spreadsheet she apparently did, or another agent did, and it showed, if you knew how to read what was the real information, we didn't take any money from anybody.
Okay, let me interject something because I don't want you to forget this. One of the things she did too that never happens is the original FBI agent on this case, the one that got kicked last week.
I forgot.
Okay. She kicked him off of the case because she started reading all these affidavits from pretty high-ranking officials, judges, cops, diming out this little, pack of wolves. I hate to use that term because that's what they were, a little corrupt
That's what the
pack of
affidavit
wolves.
says from that one cop, they're a pack of wolves.
Yeah, pack of wolves is what they are.
Keep in mind, Darlene, don't miss this, that, and I probably blew by this, but the agent, the FBI agent, and I'll use his name, Orrin Ambrose, was working, they now have in Kentucky and probably a lot of other places called a TFO. It's where they take a state officer and assign him into the FBI. And one of the cops in Russell Springs, Kentucky, that I was trying to put in prison is now working as a partner with him, with Ambrose, the original case agent in this. They were all together. It's all just one big conspiracy. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. That information came directly from the prosecutor. She started telling me things I couldn't believe she was revealing to me, and I was grateful. So I started filing motions, preparing for something called a Franks hearing to show they lied to get the search warrant. And this prosecutor suddenly realized, uh-oh, I got a problem. She sent an email to me last week and she said, I have serious concerns about the evidence in this case, and I'm moving to dismiss the case this afternoon with prejudice. She did. The judge granted it the next day. There's a lot more to it that I was preparing to put forth in this matter. Their star witness, this pharmacist that worked with us, she got misled by a bunch of people, and as she told my accountant, she was afraid her husband would find out she'd invested in something and he was violent. So she started making all kinds of crazy claims about money she said that we used and things that we told her. The biggest claim she made, which was really incredible, she said that we were going to build a pharmacy or make a pharmacy for her, and we just took the money. My son was going to testify, and I had physical evidence to this fact. Oh, and that she didn't know anything about my criminal history. My son and two others were going to testify, not just my son, but a lawyer as well, that not only did we tell her about it, I did a 3-hour radio interview in 2016, I believe, where I detailed every single element of my criminal history, and she rode in the car all the way to Cleveland with me listening to it while my son sat in the back seat. Furthermore, we went to Cleveland to buy a bunch of pharmacy stuff with her money that she wanted to say we misused. It was one lie after another. And, you know, when you get a guy coming in that's a pro se guy, they usually go, these people we'll beat them on that. They can't do that with me. And, you know, I have deep respect for this prosecutor, because even though her last email to me was trying to CYA, she said, you misled them on a couple of things, and you paid your rent and your daughter's tuition out of the investors' funds. No, we didn't. She just didn't have her numbers right, but that's fine. I didn't take a paycheck out of the company. My wife took a paycheck, and, you know, there's some real problems with a lot of those things. And what you're looking at is the last remaining victim, because my wife did die in April of 2020 from cancer. She had decided to let the cancer take her. She not only told Darlene, she told a lot of people. You know, I was gone. I wasn't going to go back into the marriage, and she said she would rather die than be harassed by the government forever. So that's pretty much the long and short of it. There's a lot of things that I've discovered since. I've got the really ironic part is in let me see, it would have been June of last year, I filed suit against Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Nadler, and a bunch of them. It was a bunch of that party, that squad and all. And in that lawsuit, I sued them because I found out the things that I blew the whistle on down in Florida included one other thing. Anybody here that's heard of the Panama Papers? The government tried to say that it was some lawyer in Texas that blew the whistle on it. It wasn't. It was me. I'm the one that came forward with it, and they were trying to shut me up, because that's where the Pelosi's and all of them laundered their money. They were taking it offshore and running it down into Panama and bringing it back. That's how Nancy Pelosi's worth over $300 million right now. She wants to sue me. I'd love it, because she had immunity. That was the bottom line. She had immunity. The PKK situation, they were also all involved in. I don't understand the dynamics of that, because I'm not a national security guy. Although Darlene calls me a national security whistleblower, that's pretty much where it is. So that's a short version of about 27 years worth of hell and nightmares. I will tell you, when I say that I believe the terrorist in Europe trying to kill me was working for the FBI, that's not an assumption. I had shown up in London in 1996, and he appeared at a hotel. We don't know how he knew where I was at. The police moved us undercover, and Scotland Yard the next day told us, there's nothing we can do. This guy said he's going to chase you to the end of the earth, and that he works for the FBI. Fortunately, that guy's dead, but that's some of the things that I went through. Darlene talked about the affidavits. I had several people, officials, law enforcement, a judge, a bunch of people sign affidavits about the things that went on in this case. And they were scared to death because they were afraid if the agents found out who they were, they might try to harm them. So the judge sealed those affidavits. I filed a motion based on that. And the judge found that they had to do that. That's not the first time that's happened in a sense, because there was a hearing in Florida years back where my kids, my neighbor, and my wife and I went to Florida to testify against this agent. And we had to be put in protective custody to protect us from the agent. And at that time, the terrorist was still alive. So when clients come to me now and they tell me that some wild story and they go, they'll never believe this. Yes, I do. You can look this up on Google. You can Google Justice Richard A. Posner. Some people call it Posner. He was the Chief Justice of the Seventh Circuit of the Court of Appeals up in the Chicago area. It's a federal circuit. And I worked with him for a year. I didn't work for him. I worked with him for a year. And he told me after 38 years on the bench, he had never heard anything or seen anything remotely like my mess. Lucky me. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not right wing. I'm not against the government. I love my government. And I got to tell you, when those two agents in Augusta, Georgia told me and did what they did for me, and the probation officer told me and did what she did for me, as I told her, I don't know, a few weeks ago when I saw her, I told her, you know, you've restored my faith in people in the government. There's a lot of really great ones. And we got to
Well,
really,
a lot of them put their career, their safety on the line. Folks, when I say affidavits, one of them was a pretty high-ranking police, let's say law enforcement official.
Yeah, he was.
In fact, let me hit this real quick. The first time when I agreed to meet Jim Fowler, okay, first time I go to his office, we're having our first meeting. There is a high-ranking law enforcement official there and another law enforcement official there. He hands me a 15-page affidavit against this pack of wolves that we're talking about, okay, these corrupt cops, laying out every kind of police brutality, lying on that, you name it. And I was like, jaw dropped. And then he handed me 4 or 5 more affidavits from cops laying these good, honest cops hate this stuff. They hate it. And these guys, one of the first things this guy said was, please tell me you and Jim are going to do something about this. And I read those affidavits. And then I knew, holy crap, what the hell is going on over here? And when I left that meeting, immediately, one of the locals, I never could see who it was, got on my butt, tailing me immediately. And, you know, he went out of his jurisdiction, okay, jumped on Highway 80. I got on the phone with my husband, and I'm like, I was mad. I'm like, he's going to pull me over. I want to record this. And my husband just said, stay calm, be cool. Because I was just, and the way he was tailing me it was intimidation. Every time I made it, he went all the way almost to Somerset on Highway 80 out of his jurisdiction and then peeled off and left. That was my first personal interaction with Jim Fowler, is meeting with honest cops and affidavits and being followed and intimidated from Jim Fowler's office.
One thing, Darlene, that I do need to point out. I filed a suit in Washington, D.C., and immediately the chief of the civil division, this was under Trump, that's all changed now. The chief of the civil division immediately contacted me and said, let's work this out. They were preparing to settle with me. Money's never going to fix what they did to me. That's not what this is. That is not what this is. Money's not going to fix this. If I talked about net worth and things, people would think I was crazy, the kind of money that was there. But I filed this lawsuit regarding things in Kentucky. And when I laid out my settlement request, they said, yeah, we'd like, it might take a while, but we're going to work through it. Then the U.S. attorney up there gave me some information on who to contact. He said he wanted me to contact the Office of Inspector General. And he explained the process and everything. I don't know how the internal workings of the Justice Department is. He said, the things done to you, they will do something about. Now, although I believe that's true, I don't know under this administration, things are crazy right now, but the fact is, I did that. And it wasn't but 2 or 3, well, no. It was within 60 days this indictment came out. And then, of course, the government filed a motion to dismiss my lawsuit and all that. This is the kind of thing that goes on and on and on. And I had an honest guy there. And They just don't want the government to ever have a black eye. They'd rather have the sewer going on than they would clean it out. Darlene, are you familiar with the list they keep on the crooked cops in Louisville? This is going to air on Louisville, right?
I'm sorry, what? Yeah,
People will
yeah.
see this in Louisville.
We have Truth or Politics in Louisville now, and I am going to get them to broadcast this.
Well, I worked a lot with Chief Conrad up there. He used to call me anytime I'm a minister in a church where I'm the only white guy. And anytime there was a problem with the races, Chief Conrad would call me because the blacks trusted me and the whites trusted me, and I could work things out usually. Bishop and I, Bishop Lawrence. And we would work on that. Well, the chief told me one night, he had taken me to dinner one night, or lunch, I'm sorry, and he said, beware of the list. And I said, what do you mean, beware of the list? He said, Commonwealth Attorney here keeps a list of all the officers that are crooked that we can't call them as witnesses in legal matters. I'm thinking to myself, they should be out the door. They shouldn't be officers.
Right.
And he told me, he said, the problem is there's just too much emphasis on not firing bad cops. And this is the problem in America right now. There's no accountability. I proved these guys were trying to kill me and they call it immunity. Who the heck are you trying to kid? The mayor testified that the chief of police was going to try to kill him. I played a recording of it. Nothing done. Where's the accountability? And then the court said, oh, well, wait a minute. They've got immunity. Ladies and gentlemen, you better worry about the immunity because there's no way around it. I don't know how many, Darlene, I don't know how many lawsuits I've filed. I mean, we're 50, 60 maybe. I don't know. That might be high. I don't know. But it's never come back anything where the facts weren't correct. It's always comes back where the immunity is taking place. And then when I had the lawsuit in Russell County with David Williams over the case, kangaroo court extraordinaire. That's all I can say. And several people, several officials have signed affidavits about the case. Two of them were there. And David even threatened to arrest the guy helping me sitting at the table next to me in front of the jury. What are you going to do, As a matter of fact, you testified at that.
I absolutely did. I testified at that. And one of the things I testified to was about the telephone call we got from the United States Attorney's Office, who was investigating Steve Pence. In fact, that's been posted in the Louisville Courier Journal that Steve Pence was an unindicted co-conspirator. Okay, so they were investigating him, and this was at the same time we were trying to help Karen Cipher. And Steve Pence and Karen Cipher, Steve Pence and Rick Pitino are like this, okay?
Yeah,
and so was Karen Cipher's lawyer. Okay, they were all big buddies that railroaded her into prison. So one of the things I testified about was that phone call. And I didn't, I was kind of mad on that phone call because Jim, I wanted to steer these AUSA to listen to us about what was going on down here. And they kept wanting to go after David Williams. I mean, it was real apparent to me by the way they were asking the questions that they wanted us to give information on David Williams. And I didn't have that information, but I was on this phone call. It was a conference call.
Well, don't forget, Darlene, David was running mates with Richie Farmer to become the governor. And don't forget, Richie Farmer went to prison for some bank fraud. And that's what they were, what their questioning, their line of questioning was, one of the private jets that David was known to be involved with, his father-in-law at the time, me being a pilot, I understood flight records, and I also safety piloted on one of the jets. And I had access to those records because of a legal case that rose up, and I was being called as an expert on that. So they were interviewing me about David's transportation around between venues and where he was going and all that. And if you remember right, while I was testifying, you were sitting there at the table. David, they ordered me to testify, and it was my case. They ordered me to testify. David was basically trying to figure out what evidence I had against him. And he looked at me and he said, "You'll never find me in any of those records." And I said, "You won't find me either." I didn't acknowledge because he was all over those records. And,
But here's the important thing that needs to go said, that needs to be said. Here you and I were testifying about an investigation that was potentially into David Williams, and they were calling us. And David Williams is the judge on your case. Okay, what David Williams should have done immediately is exclude himself.
Well, that's why we were, Darlene, that's why we were testifying, is in support. I had filed motions to get him out,
right,
to get him off the case, because the trial I had, it was the biggest joke you've ever seen. I'd ask a question, he'd say, "Come here a minute." And he'd call me up, he was trying to humiliate me. And I finally started laughing. I thought, this is ridiculous. And then the foreman of the grand jury of a former grand jury got on the stand, and she started testifying about how she was threatened, but you could tell she was scared. So I put the guy on the stand that threatened her, and he was part of this group with these cops. And he started actually bragging about what he was doing. And I said to him, I said, "Do you understand that that's jury tampering?" "Well, yeah, but that doesn't matter." This is the kind of crap, and I'm thinking to myself, I looked at the judge and he goes, "We're stopping the hearing now. It's the end of the day." And what he was trying to do is protect this guy. The guy just inculpated himself in a major felony, and this is what my complaint was. But so.
And when I was testifying too, anytime I started going, the jury was like leaning forward, listening, and I was crucial evidence of things that I saw myself, the judge would shut me up.
Every time.
Every time. It's like I wasn't allowed, and this was key to his case of why he did what he did.
Here's the thing. I would ask you, were you threatened during the Greider case? Because that was the pharmacy that was under trial. Were you threatened during the Greider case?
I testified at too. I testified at that one too.
Yes, you did. You would go to answer the question. He'd say, "No, we're not going to talk about that." And I end up with some bogus judgment against me. And now that's, as strange as the good Lord works things out, that's a major hitch pin in some of the things much, much higher officials are looking at. So, I mean, that you've heard the story. I mean, they, killed my kids. They've imprisoned me 5 times, indicted me 7 times. Courts have said I'm a victim, yet they leave the convictions in place. They call the death of my children and the rape of my other daughter collateral damage. They protect the Pelosi's and the Schumers and the Schiffs. We're not talking about a little bit of money there. That deal I tripped over by accident when I was 30-some years old. I'm 60 now. Amounts to billions. And these politicians in D.C., they were all flowing their money through there. And I had come up with it was one of these deals that one document related to another. And the press in Canada is the one that called me and gave me the information. It was a show called Fifth Avenue Estate. Howard Goldblum, I think his name was, called me. He said, "Are you involved in this case?" And it was the case against me. I said, "Yeah." He said, "I've got information for you." And he sent it to me. And here it was, the Panama Papers. It was the PKK and all that, every bit of it. And so that's where it is. You can't hardly find anything online anymore because they make sure it's gone. But we're going to see if I can't restore that now.
Well, and we'll see if that's, once we put this online, let's see how long this stays up. So, but this is going to be on TV. We're going to put it on Facebook. We're going to put it on the internet, and we'll see what happens.
One last thing I want to tell you. I said it earlier, but I want to say it more. Darlene, thank you. Thank you not only for what you do, but what you did for my family and I. There's no words I could ever have. You guys, you and Austin have been unbelievable. One of your friends told me one time, he said, "These are really good people." And I said, "You better believe they are." I really appreciate you. I really appreciate you guys.
Well,
I love both of you dearly. Thank you.
Well, we think the world of you. We believe, and we've proved up repeatedly that you're being persecuted and prosecuted, repeatedly prosecuted by corrupt by corrupt officials, period, because we dared to go after it, and you dared starting off to go after the corrupt officials. I mean, this all started, folks, because he stumbled into a PKK, which is a terrorist organization, and tried to go to the feds and here's the documents, do something. And instead, McAdams out of Florida, for whatever reason, I don't know the details on that, chooses to shut Jim up and go after Jim Fowler. That's how this started. Anyways, Jim, you're an incredible human being to survive everything you survived. For people who don't believe that this happens, I've been involved in so many whistleblower cases, and so many people like Jim who have been persecuted and who have been threatened, we testified, myself as a former federal agent, I testified in 2007 on Capitol Hill in front of a congressional hearing that we were trying to get whistleblower protection laws passed. This is in front of Congress. We had so many federal agents, I'm talking FBI agents, IRS agents, you name it. Guess what? One of them, three of them were from the SEC, the Securities and Exchange. One of the things they were trying to expose, and they literally did the same thing they did to Jim, to these federal agents now, the federal agents, okay? They were trying to expose the Wall Street debacle of 2008, you know, the government shutdown, the cave-in of Wall Street, okay, that was billions. These guys found where these Wall Street hedge fund people were cooking the books. They were trying to expose that when other federal agencies went after them. These are federal agents, hundreds of them, that wanted to come and testify, and they had so many that they had 2 rooms going on Capitol Hill. And I was fortunate enough to be one of the people. They literally, at one point, I think they had 700 federal employees that were risking their careers to come forward and testify for whistleblower protection about waste, fraud, abuse, and some of the most unbelievable corruption cases. And they did. A lot of them did. They couldn't let 700 of them. So they picked like the top cases. And I was fortunate enough with my Bordergate case to be there. So you need to understand that if they're willing to come after a federal agent, trained and armed to the teeth, and do the kind of things that they did to me and my task force, that, you know, and one of the people that worked with me on my task force was supposed to testify with me. And his information, his name's John Carmen, his information, okay, about the corruption that I witnessed in my case, okay, was crucial. 3 days before he's due to testify in front of the U.S. Congress with me, the FBI storms his house and arrests him. He did, right. And you talk, I testified in his case. My husband helped represent him. We got him out a little bit quicker, but it was a total corrupt case. And their key witness against John Carmen, a stellar U.S. Customs agent who worked with Secret Service first, he had almost 20 years of experience. This guy was an honest guy, okay? Their number one witness against John Carmen was an illegal alien that they convicted previously of lying to the police. That was their key witness. You can't make this stuff up. So if you think, go ahead, if you think that they can't do this to a civilian, they do this to honorable federal agents and cops as well. And most honest cops and judges and honest prosecutors hate this. Go ahead.
Would you agree that there's no place to go?
Yeah, there's no place to go. Here's an example. The OIG, Office of Inspector General, that's supposed to kind of be the watchdog of these federal agencies. 25,
here's the thing that scares me.
Go ahead.
If I didn't, and I almost want to name him, but I don't know if he'd appreciate it or not. The lawyer that gave me the skills I have, and then of course there's a lot of them that helped, and you know, I've been practicing for 20 years now, 25. If I didn't have the skills I do, here's what would have happened. I would either have to have about $500,000 to hire legal counsel that was competent, or I'd have to take a public pretender. if I took a public pretender, the best I could hope for is I'd have pled out and got 5 years. I'd have been in prison for 5 years because they wouldn't do all the things I did. It took a lot to get all this together, and it took, I mean, you helped me. Lots, I don't want to name anybody else, but there were a lot of people. I told, you saw the email I sent to the prosecutor. I said, I got lots and lots and lots of help. And I do. And you can't do this alone. And, you know, the thing is, it's like the element, you know, that just came out of surprise, that the CI for this deal, I blew right past this, and it's a big issue with me. My little 12-year-old girl, the CI gave her drugs and then was trying to groom her for sex. You know, this is
the confidential source. Wait. This is one of the confidential sources that the government was using to go after Jim Fowler. This is the kind of person this was. Gave his little kid drugs, psycho drugs too.
Yeah, shrooms, acid, and something else. But fortunately, my older daughter, who is like Darlene, can fight. She said she walked in when this was going on. This guy was showing her pornography and giving her drugs. Now you tell me what that's for. 12 years old. You got any other purpose, Darlene? You're trained in this stuff. I'm not. What else is it? You know, there's no other possibility. This is what the government, and they will protect them. The guy that raped my 4-year-old years ago, I get a letter from the Ohio prosecutor, the state attorney. He says, it's not like we don't know this happened. In fact, we believe it did happen, but we won't prosecute him at this time. Why? I find out the federal prosecutor in Florida asked him not to. This is a sick kind of crap that goes on and on and on. And the Lord.
This is the same federal. Wait. This is the same federal prosecutor, by the way, that called up to Russell County and actually demanded that the Commonwealth attorney at the time go after Jim Fowler. And when he didn't and he refused to, he bullied him.
That's right. And he's involved even in this last indictment. It's once removed, but he's the one that was involved with the prosecutors in Lexington that did the IRS case. And this prosecutor I have now was honest enough to admit to me how this case came about, and he's involved, along with the state cop that we've been trying to put in jail and the IRS agent and all of them. They're all involved because that's how it works. And I got to tell you something, Darlene, it's funny because when this order came down, I screamed out real loud, as you can imagine. It's been 27 years since I've been a free man. And I looked at who I was with, and I don't want to name anything, but I just said, I don't believe this. I'm a free man for the first time, truly free for the first time in 30 years, or 27 years. 27 years.
When he told me this was coming, I didn't believe it either. Because folks, ask any lawyer, anybody out there working, and ask them, have you ever heard a federal judge and a federal prosecutor dismiss a criminal case against the FBI with prejudice? Have you ever seen that? And they'll all tell you, no. I have a lawyer friend here in Kentucky, and I showed him this, and he goes, this ain't real. This ain't real. And I'm like, hell it is. This is real. This just happened. And he's literally sat down. He goes, I've never seen anything like this.
You know, the radio show where I live tried to do a real bad hatchet job on me, and they did for 3 hours. Well, now the other day I sent this order to him, and he sends me a text message back, says, I got to verify this. It can't be real. It's just.
I know, because it never happens. It never happens. I mean, I'm sure maybe it has happened, but they just don't do that because they see themselves. And this is one of the problems with the justice system. Too many times prosecutors get too friendly and almost become a team with federal agents. Okay. And the prosecutor's job is to get to the truth of the matter. The prosecutor's job is to be a line of defense also with these federal agents. And what the prosecutor is supposed to do is validate, verify that the federal agents have done their job correctly and everything else, okay? And a lot of times they just don't. It's like they're on their team. And you know what? They're supposed to be extremely objective. And a lot of them are. In fact, on our case, our Bordergate case, we actually had she's a judge now. At the time, she showed up and testified, and it made history because it was the first time that a sitting judge testified against the federal government about the corruption and stuff that she saw. And since then, she's been retaliated against. Go ahead.
I'm set.
Okay, folks, this amazing story is true. If you go on Facebook, I'll have this posted right under this. What I'm going to ask everybody to do is please share the hell out of this. Everybody put it on your page. If Facebook takes it off, keep putting it back on. This really happened. For those of us who've been following, our show's been on the air for 11 years now, coming up on 12 years, okay? And we have a lot of credibility in Kentucky because we have done fuzz busting. You know, a lot of people, we've exposed a lot of corruption, a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse here in the county and elsewhere, and a lot of people don't have jobs because of that. So we have a lot of credibility with what we do, and that's why other counties came to us and said, we want Truth or Politics here. And now we have Truth or Politics in Pulaski County and the surrounding county area, and then also in Louisville. So I'm here to tell you that I stake my reputation on this. Jim Fowler, everything that Jim Fowler just told you is absolutely true. So Jim Fowler, I think you're an amazing person. And like I said, that song, I won't back down, applies to you. And I wish you all the best. And I know some other things are happening to completely clear your name because we proved up, you know, what we proved up. Yep. And I hope other honest cops learn from this. You honest cops out there and honest federal agents,
they're the best.
They're the best, but you also need to call people on their, have your BS meter up and call the dirty cops on their business. That's what you need to do, because what's going to happen when, you know, when good men do nothing, that's where evil flourishes. And I'm going to end on that, folks. And I want to say congratulations to Jim Fowler after over 20 years of fighting the government, winning in a big way, and you deserve it. So,
thanks,
folks, we will see you next time on Truth or Politics. Thanks.